All right, so today we're diving into Sapphire Foods. You know, they're a big name in the Indian QSR scene, right? Running all those KFCs and Pizza Huts, even Taco Bell.
Yeah, they've got a pretty big footprint over there.
And we've got their Q3 FY25 earnings call transcript. So we're basically getting a glimpse behind the curtain at how they're doing, their game plan, and what they see coming down the pike.
Should be interesting. The Indian market is so dynamic, always something going on over there.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting. We'll unpack how those different brands are doing, their take on the industry as a whole, their plans for growth, and even the risks they're keeping an eye on.
Sounds like a lot to cover.
It is. But hey, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. Let's start with what's probably their biggest brand, KFC. They've actually doubled their store count in India in just the past 3 years.
Wow, that's aggressive.
Oh.
Especially given the economic climate, right?
Yeah, it's a bold move for sure. But their new stores seem to be doing well. The real head-scratcher is the same-store sales growth, the SSSG, been negative for the past year, hovering around negative 3%.
So sales at existing KFCs are down? Not great.
Not ideal, right? Makes you wonder about that expansion strategy.
Well, it's not uncommon even when existing locations are facing some headwinds. The idea is often, to grab market share, really establish a presence, and hope that operational improvements will follow.
Makes sense, but risky.
It's a gamble.
So what's Sapphire Foods' explanation for this KFC dip?
Basically pointing fingers at the broader economic slowdown in India and, increased competition. Lots of QSR businesses are feeling the pinch. What I find interesting is their strategy to fight back.
Okay, tell me more.
They're going all in on value offers for their core products, like that Taste the Epic campaign you've probably seen. Kind of a back-to-basics approach.
So instead of trying to get new customers with, fancy new menu items, they're trying to win back their loyal base with familiar favorites, but at a good price.
Yeah, play on that nostalgia comfort food angle.
Smart, but will it work?
That's the million-dollar question. Can it actually offset those economic pressures and that intense competition? Need to look at things like average check size, customer acquisition costs, all that.
You mean, are they making enough per customer?
Mm-hmm.
And how much are they spending to get each new one or win back old ones?
Exactly. Those are the numbers that'll tell the real story.
Okay, so KFC is a bit of a question mark.
Yeah.
What about Pizza Hut? How's that brand doing?
Pizza Hut, you know what? It's a bit of a comeback story. After 8 quarters of decline, they're finally back in the green. Positive SSG hit 5% growth.
Oh, wow. A turnaround. How'd they pull that off?
Well, they say it's mostly from more marketing spend and really focusing on that dine-in experience.
Making it special?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they're not getting ahead of themselves. Still pretty cautious about expanding Pizza Hut until they see double-digit profitability at the store level.
So no rush to just open a bunch of new locations.
Nope. They want to make sure each one is a hit, not just adding to the roster, They're all about sustainable growth over just rapid expansion.
I like that approach. Right, now for something totally unexpected, Sri Lanka. Their business there is booming. Double-digit SSSG, 14%, mostly from increased transactions. That's wild, especially with the economic issues Sri Lanka's been going through.
Right. You wouldn't expect that. But it kind of shows how important it is to just get those fundamentals right. Good product, smooth experience, strong value proposition.
The basics.
Yep. And in a shaky market like Sri Lanka, those basics can make a huge difference when things start to recover.
It's like their Sri Lankan operation is a mini success story. Okay, let's zoom out now and look at the big picture. What's Sapphire Foods saying about the overall QSR market in India right now? What's their industry outlook?
Well, they're admitting that consumer sentiment is still a little iffy. No signs of a huge turnaround anytime soon. Which, it's a challenge for the whole QSR industry, not just them.
So no quick rebound on the horizon.
Not exactly, but they're hopeful about some things in the recent Indian budget. Measures aimed at giving the middle class more disposable income.
They're hoping some of that government stimulus trickles down to their customers.
That's the bet. More money in people's pockets, more money to spend on eating out.
But even with that potential boost, there are still hurdles, right? Let's talk about the risks Sapphire Foods is calling out. What are they worried about?
One of the biggest ones, honestly, is just how competitive it is. They haven't seen any real drop in competition, which means, pressure on profitability.
So it's a constant battle for customers.
Oh, yeah. You've got new players popping up all the time, existing ones fighting for market share, and then the whole rise of cloud kitchens on top of that. It's tough out there.
A real pressure cooker. And it's not just competition, right? What else are they concerned about?
Well, they mentioned this lingering anti-US brand sentiment. Hard to measure exactly, but it's a risk for brands like KFC and Pizza Hut.
Kind of adds a geopolitical layer to the whole thing.
Exactly. And then there's the shift to delivery, which is still eating into dine-in sales.
Yeah, everybody's ordering in these days.
Right. And while they think dine-in might come back eventually, you have to wonder what the future holds for that classic QSR dine-in experience. Is it on its way out?
That's a good question. Times are changing. So many factors at play here. It sounds like Sapphire Foods is in a tricky spot.
No doubt. But there's something else too, maybe even a bigger risk, lurking beneath the surface. Something they didn't say directly, but it's there in everything they talked about. It's execution, you know? Can they actually pull off all these plans? Continued expansion for KFC, focus on profitability for Pizza Hut, navigating this whole delivery versus dine-in thing. In a market like India, that's tough.
The classic strategy versus execution problem. It's easy to make a plan, but actually making it happen. With all those moving parts, consumer behavior changing, the economy being unpredictable, all that competition, that's the real test.
Absolutely. And that's why this look we're getting from the earnings call is so interesting. You get a feel for the pressures they're under, the decisions they're making. Like take Pizza Hut, for instance. They're putting more money into marketing, right? Trying to revitalize the brand, but they're holding back on expansion until the profitability numbers look better.
It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got to grow, but make sure each new restaurant is actually making money.
Exactly. And then with KFC, they're really banking on it being huge in India long term, even with the sales dip they're dealing with right now. Sticking with it, investing, even when things are tough. Take some guts.
And don't forget Sri Lanka. It's a great story right now. But can they keep that going as they get bigger? Can they stay focused on those fundamentals? Product, experience, value, as things get more complicated.
It's a big question, keeping that consistency across different markets, different brands, especially while they're growing. That's hard. Needs strong systems, good leadership, and really understanding each market.
So, okay, we've talked about their brands, the industry overall, their future plans, the risks. What's the big takeaway here? What does it all mean?
I think it boils down to this. Sapphire Foods' story, it's like a mini version of what businesses face in any emerging market. They're dealing with growth, profitability, consumer behavior that keeps changing. It's unpredictable, and there are no easy answers.
So, why should our listeners care about this? What's the takeaway for them? It's just fast food, right?
It's bigger than that. What they're going through, the good and the bad, it tells us about spending habits in India, how global brands work in local markets, and maybe even some lessons for businesses anywhere that are facing similar issues.
Like, even big established brands can be vulnerable. The global economy impacts everyone.
Exactly. And that's what makes these deep dives so interesting. We're not just talking about one company. We're learning about these bigger trends that affect the whole business world.
Speaking of insights, let's do a quick recap before we move on. We started with those different brands, right? KFC tried to turn things around, Pizza Hut doing better, and that unexpected success in Sri Lanka.
Right. Then we looked at the whole industry kind of optimistic, but hoping that government spending will boost consumer spending.
And we dug into their plans for the future expansion for KFC, a focus on profits for Pizza Hut, and always adapting to what consumers want. But there are risks, of course. Competition, anti-U.S. sentiment, that shift to delivery, and, well, can they actually execute their plan?
A lot to think about.
Yeah, but there's one thing that keeps bugging me. Something the earnings call didn't really address directly, but it has huge consequences for them down the road.
Let me guess. You're thinking about the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Inflation.
You got it. Food costs are up. Supply chains are a mess. Finding workers is hard. It's a nightmare for any business that relies on low prices and small profit margins.
You're right. It's a silent killer of profits. And it's not just a Sapphire Foods problem. You can see them hinting at it in the transcript a few times, talking about efficiency, optimizing their menus, even raising prices carefully.
Walking a tightrope, trying to make money, but not scare customers away, especially with all that competition.
Exactly. And it comes back to that big question. Can Sapphire Foods really succeed in India long term? The economy, competition, and now inflation, it's not going to be easy.
So can they do it?
Based on this earnings call, I think they've got a shot, they have a plan, they use data, and they seem to be adapting. But can they actually execute? Can they handle all this external pressure? That's what will decide it.
Reminds us that nothing is guaranteed. The world is constantly changing.
That's the truth. And that brings us to our final thought for our listeners today. Think about everything we've talked about. Sapphire Foods, their wins, their struggles, the challenges. What do you think? Are they set up for success, or are they in for a rude awakening? We've given you the information, now it's up to you to decide.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Sapphire Foods.
It really is a fascinating story, isn't it? I mean, Sapphire Foods is operating in such a tough market. They're trying to balance growing, making money, and keeping up with consumers who, well, they always seem to be changing their minds. It's like a high wire act over there.
You're not wrong. And the interesting thing is, like we've been saying, they're not alone in this. It's a story we're seeing play out with businesses all over the world, especially in these fast-growing economies.
Yeah, it's like a real-time business case study.
Yeah.
So if we had to boil it down, what can we learn from Sapphire Foods? What are the big takeaways?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons is being flexible, strategically flexible. Sapphire Foods is showing us how to do that. They're taking a different approach with each brand. Like KFC is all about expansion, but Pizza Hut is more about profit, right? They're adapting, changing their game plan depending on the brand and the market. That's huge in a place like India where things are always changing. It's like they have a different playbook for each brand, which, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And that leads to another big takeaway. Using data. They're really focused on the numbers. Same store sales growth, average daily sales, EBITDA, all that. They're not just going with their gut. They're using data to make decisions.
It makes you wonder how many businesses are just winging it.
More than you'd think, probably. Especially the older, more traditional companies.
Interesting. So we've got flexibility, data-driven decisions. Anything else?
Yeah.
Any other big lessons we can take away from this?
The third one, and maybe the most important one, is execution. Having a good plan is great, but Sapphire Foods is showing us that actually making it happen in a tough market like India, that's where the rubber meets the road. If they can't execute, all those plans don't really matter.
Reminds me of that saying, plans are nothing, planning is everything. Got to be able to change, adapt as you go.
100%. It's not just about having a fancy strategy. It's about being able to handle the challenges that pop up, Yeah. Being able to change direction when you need to.
So let's bring it back to our listener. After all this talk about Sapphire Foods, what are the key things they should remember? What's the big takeaway for them?
I think the biggest thing is that Sapphire Foods, their story is a snapshot of what's happening in the business world globally. They're dealing with intense competition, consumers who are always changing, economic uncertainty. These are things that businesses everywhere are facing.
Yeah, it's like we're all connected. What happens in one place can affect the whole world.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, to keep learning, to ask questions. The more we understand about business, the better we'll be able to handle the challenges and, take advantage of the opportunities.
So true. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Sapphire Foods. We hope you enjoyed it and that maybe it gave you a few things to think about.
Yeah, the insights we've shared are just the beginning. The real learning comes from, from taking these ideas and applying them to your own life, your own business.
Keep learning, keep questioning, keep exploring. And until next time, happy diving.